From Lagos, the nation's commercial capital, this is the News at 10. Live from Channels Television. Reporting tonight, Ijoma Onyato.
Hello and welcome. Fresh revelations on how Kano mysterious deaths as Presidential Task Force on COVID-19 reveals that about 60% of deaths in Kano may have been triggered by COVID-19. House of Representatives begin public hearing on donations and funds allocated to fight against COVID-19, threaten to arrest Accountant General of the Federation for disobeying summons. Abia State Governor Okezie Ikpeazu assures Abia people he remains stable and in high spirits as his second COVID-19 test result is positive. National Association of Resident Doctors to begin nationwide strike on June the 15th says their colleagues treating COVID-19 patients will not be left out. And George Floyd murder suspect appears virtually in court as U.S. Democrats introduce bill to reform American police. Plus, we'll have business, sports, news from Abuja, the FCT, and later on news from our studios in London.
On business news tonight, Nigeria's GDP expected to contract by 3.2% this year as World Bank forecasts worst recession for global economy since World War II.
On sports news tonight, Olympique Lyon becomes first League One side to resume training after cancellation of the season due to the coronavirus outbreak.
And from Abuja, Federal High Court in Kano dismisses suit by deposed Emir of Kano, Muhammad Sanusi II, seeking to stop his investigation over alleged racketeering of landed property belonging to the Kano Emirate Council worth 2 billion naira.
50 to 60% of the strange deaths reported in Kano State in April this year may have been triggered by COVID-19. And that's according to the Presidential Task Force on COVID-19 during its daily news conference today in Abuja. The Minister of Health says the report from the fact-finding team sent to the state in the month of May is coming after the team says it conducted a verbal autopsy on the deceased.
It's been over 1 month since Kano State reported a huge number of strange deaths in the state, making the Presidential Task Force on COVID-19 to send a fact-finding team to the state to unravel the cause of death.
Director General.
The Minister of Health at the daily news conference of the Presidential Task Force in Abuja gives further update on the mission to Kano State.
This morning, the Federal Ministry of Health received the report of the ministerial task team that went to Kano. The verbal autopsy that we spoke of revealed that about 56% of the deaths had occurred at home, while 38 were in a hospital, and with the circumstantial evidence as all to go by, the investigation suggests that 50 to 60% of the deaths may have been triggered by or due to COVID-19 in the face of pre-existing ailments.
The national coordinator of the PTF also announces a new guideline for the evacuation of Nigerians from abroad.
The key part of the proposal is that there will be a need for Nigerians that are currently outside the country to undergo a PCR test for COVID-19 before they board. These tests need to be valid at least for 14 days. And prior to boarding, they will be required to provide an undertaking that they will follow the necessary precautions that we have applied when they come into country. It's unlike in the past, we will not be responsible for the transportation or the accommodation of Nigerians coming in. They will need to make their own alternative arrangements to stay in Lagos or Abuja, not only for the period of testing, but also for the period of self-isolation. But they can, if they wish, stay at home, provided they undergo self-isolation at home.
Meanwhile, the task force chairman says his visit to the NCDC reference laboratory at the weekend exposes him to the need for capacity building. Just as the Director General of the NCDC says, there is need to learn from the current experience and build a secured health system in the future.
The visit to the National Reference Laboratory has shown that while we ramp up capacity for testing, we must also enhance the skills and size of manpower to run the laboratories.
We will need to build on what we have learned from this outbreak to design a health security architecture for the future. And this means that we'll need to use technology, use our platforms, and build a lot more closer relationship across the different tiers of government.
There are currently over 12,000 confirmed cases of COVID-19 from the over 78,000 samples tested in the last 3 months. The task force says it expects more cases as testing capacity is increased across the country.
Interstate travel ban.
22.2 billion naira has so far been released to the Presidential Task Force on COVID-19, while 164 million naira has been utilized for the needs of returnees from other countries. Those figures were given today at a public hearing held by the House of Representatives Committee on Public Accounts. The lawmakers also threatened to issue a warrant of arrest against the Accountant General of the Federation for failing to honor the House Committee's invitation. Our correspondent Terry Ikumi reports.
I'm from Osun State.
The last time the Presidential Task Force on COVID-19 appeared before the House of Representatives, the chairman told the lawmakers that he was not armed with figures of the amount so far released to the PTF. The House Committee on Public Accounts has now invited the task force, hoping that the figures are now available.
The PTF does not receive.
The Secretary to the Government of the Federation, who is also the chairman of the PTF, as well as the Ministers of Health and Foreign Affairs, are all represented by their permanent secretaries.
The federal government has, at date, released 22,163,130,411 naira to the PTF operations account, 164,929,475. And that has been utilized to cater for the management of the affairs of returnees, evacuees.
He, however, says the rest of the funds are still intact. The committee also sought to know how much money had been allocated to the Ministries of Health and Foreign Affairs, as well as the NCDC.
On paper, he got 500 million. In terms of cash released for the evacuation, 250 million.
The first release that was given to us is still there intact. I've not spent a dime out of that money. The first release that I received towards from my own capital 2020 to finance the COVID was 2.4 billion.
So far, in total, specifically for the COVID response, therefore, we have received 5,620 million naira from the federal government of Nigeria.
There are activities like the media, for instance, that they haven't billed us, that we haven't been billed, and we will be billed, and we will pay depending on the level of evidence they provide.
Why would you want to incur an expenditure on bills? So are you giving the people a flat, a blanket, an open check?
Some details are missing, according to the lawmakers, from donations to grants and other funds, and can only be made available by the Accountant General of the Federation. But he is absent.
Stop breaking the function of the Constitution. Otherwise, we will do the needful. Mr. Chairman, we will invoke the function of the Constitution and issue warrant of arrest.
The public hearing continues in a week, and according to the committee, the Accountant General must appear. Terry Ikumi, Channels Television News.
Meanwhile, the Kogi state government has continued its war of words with the Nigeria Center for Disease Control, insisting that the index case and chief imam of Kaba Bunu, Sheikh Abubakar Ahmad, did not test positive for COVID-19, as claimed by the NCDC. This was reiterated by the State Commissioner for Information and Communication, Mr. Kingsley Fanwo, at the media briefing in Lokoja, the state capital. He accuses both the NCDC and the National Hospital Abuja of colluding to falsify the cleric's test results.
We are challenging the NCDC to tell the whole world what they know about this and what they were hiding about the so-called index case that was recorded for Kogi State. And that was why we also raised the issue of the second one, because they said he was tested positive alongside his son. His son was moving around Abuja town, buying things for his father, relating and interacting, mingling with even health officials at the National Hospital. So if he was actually positive, why didn't they isolate him? Why were they so free with him, even health and medical officers? That shows that he was never positive. And that shows that even the chief imam was never positive. So it is the responsibility of Kogi State to come out to tell our citizens the truth about this, because the state government had to take proactive measures by locking down the entire local government, and people went through harrowing experiences.
Well, on its part, the NCDC says it will not join issues with the Kogi state government over the COVID-19 case. The NCDC Director General, Dr. Chikwe Ihekwazo, explained at the Presidential Task Force briefing today that the samples of Kogi State's index case were taken after the patient was referred to one of the health centers in Abuja.
You know, on Kogi, I really want to not answer too many questions on Kogi because we have to just keep pushing on the right things. The extra case we announced was referred to a health center in Abuja. We get the samples. At NCDC, sometimes we don't even know where the sample has come from exactly. Our role is to get the sample, do the test, send the result back, do the surveillance, analyze the data, use it to make public health decisions. And no, we haven't received any extra samples to test, but we also don't just test random samples collected. Every sample must be linked to an individual by the time it gets to us.
And over in the southeast, the Abia State Governor, Okeze Ikpeazu, has joined the list of high-profile Nigerians who have tested positive for coronavirus in the country. The governor was said to have volunteered his sample for COVID-19 tests on May the 30th after 2 of his aides tested positive. On June the 2nd, the governor's result returned negative, but not convinced, he submitted another sample to the NCDC laboratory on June the 4th for further confirmation, and the test returned positive. Meanwhile, Governor Ikpeazu has gone into isolation in line with the NCDC protocols and has directed his deputy, Mr. Udechukwu, to act on his behalf. And in Gombe State, the Speaker of the State House of Assembly and 4 other lawmakers have tested positive for COVID-19. The cases were confirmed today when results of the samples sent to the Nigeria Center for Disease Control were released. The Speaker and the lawmakers have since been admitted at the State Treatment Center. And this is coming days after the Governor ordered the closure of the office of the Secretary to the State Government and the Government House Clinic following the death of the director in the office of the SSG. So far, Gombe has recorded 217 cases of the virus. In the meantime, 202 out of the 283 COVID-19 patients have recovered and been discharged as the government lifted all lockdowns and ban on weekly markets in Jigawa State. Governor Badaru Abubakar, who announced this at a press briefing in Dutse, the state capital, says 120 Almajirai are among those discharged and only 2 are left in the isolation center. According to him, the success recorded was as a result of the government's efforts at ramping up testing capacity and increasing surveillance.
To date, the state has tested 2,060 suspected cases, out of which 283 returned positive. 222 patients have so far recovered, and 8 have died. Another laudable progress is the fact that we have not entered the stage of community transmission in the state. In addition to foregoing, no local government is under lockdown currently. Consequently, the state found it necessary to lift the weekly market day suspension with immediate effect.
And elsewhere, the Niger Delta Development Commission, that is, has asked all its staff to self-isolate in compliance with the directive from the River State Ministry of Health in view of the Commission's index case. All suspected cases have been asked to present themselves for testing, line listing and contact tracing in order to ensure public health safety. Now, he says the Commission is liaising with the State Public Health Emergency Team and the NCDC to conduct COVID-19 tests for members of staff and their dependents. Staff of the remaining directorates and departments have been advised to present themselves for testing at the medical unit of the Commission. In part 2, after the break, resident doctors to begin strike on June the 15th. Those treating COVID-19 patients will also join the industrial action. That's up for discussion a bit later. And we'll be joined by the president of the National Association of Resident Doctors, Dr. Aliyu Sokomba. That's in a moment. Just stay with us. Welcome back. If you've just joined us, you're watching the news at 10 on Channels Television, coming to you live from Lagos. A reminder of our top stories. Fresh revelations on Kano mysterious deaths as Presidential Task Force on COVID-19 reveals that about 60% of deaths in Kano may have been triggered by coronavirus. House of Representatives begin public hearing on donations and funds allocated to fight against COVID-19. Threatened to arrest Accountant General of the Federation for disobeying summons. Abia State Governor Okezie Ikpeazu assures Abia people he remains stable and in high spirits as his second COVID-19 test result is positive. National Association of Resident Doctors to begin nationwide strike on June the 15th says their colleagues treating COVID-19 patients will not be left out. And George Floyd murder suspect appears virtually in court as U.S. Democrats introduce bill to reform American police. Our website, channelstv.com, has more information on our top stories and others. Subscribe and watch Channels Television's live stream on YouTube and other social media platforms using your mobile device browser, or download the Channels TV app for Android and iOS devices from their respective stores. You can also watch us via your smart TV platforms on Apple TV, Android, Fire TV, and Roku as well. A federal lawmaker, Senator Ali Ndume, is advocating a salary slash for civil servants, insisting that they should make that sacrifice, especially since they no longer go to work. Senator Ndume, who is the chairman, Senate Committee on Army, was speaking in Maiduguri, the Borno state capital. He was unhappy that despite the effects of COVID-19 pandemic, the government is spending more sustaining personnel and non-personnel costs.
The government should critically look at the personnel and recurrent expenditure, which consumes about 70% of the budget. More should be pumped into capital, and people should make sacrifice. This is the time to look at issues critically. But as I said, when I talk like this, which is my own opinion, people misinterpret it and call me all sorts of names, and but I try to express myself. I think there should be more sacrifice, especially on the personnel side. How can you sustain the same personnel and overhead costs when even the work that you are doing, most people don't work, go to office now, and they are being paid for fully for the month? Is there any justification for that? If you can't work because of the pandemic, then you should be given palliative and be paid less.
Following their initial verbal warning, the National Association of Resident Doctors has issued a notice of planned indefinite strike, which is to commence on June the 15th. In a statement, the president of the NARD, Dr. Aliyu Sokomba, indicated that the government has been insensitive to their demands, while isolation centers and COVID-19 treatment centers will not be exempted. Now let's look at some of the doctors' demands, which include but are not limited to illegal deductions in salaries of members by some state governments, up to 25% in some cases, non-payment of salaries of some members, non-payment of COVID-19 inducement allowances, and inadequate supply of personal protective equipment and others. Others include harassment and assault of doctors in the line of carrying out their legitimate duties, and failure of the government to provide life insurance for doctors and other health workers on the front line. The president of the National Association of Resident Doctors, Dr. Aliyu Sokomba, joins me live now from Zaria in Kaduna State. Thanks a lot for joining us on the News at 10. I mean, some say that this is not the time to go on a warning strike or any other type of strike. For your colleagues and yourself on the front line, what have you seen that has caused you to take this decision now?
Thank you for having me. Unfortunately, with the current situation on ground, we cannot continue to offer care to Nigerians. And at this point, we're pausing that a review be made so that we can offer care of the highest standards to Nigerians. As we speak now, the health of doctors providing care on the front line, the well-being of doctors providing care at the front line is compromised, and it's making it impossible for us to continue to offer care. I'll give you an instance. As we speak right now, the death of my colleague, Dr. Abubakar Lano, had just been announced in the Federal Teaching Hospital in Gombe State following COVID-19 infection. And just 10 days ago, we also lost one of our colleagues, Dr. Nasir Adam, to same COVID-19 just 10 days ago. And the death is just rising, unfortunately. And all of this is largely attributed to the inadequacy of personal protective equipment that we have since been clamoring for, that's not available in our institutions. And on top of all of this, our members do not have life insurance to fall back on. That's whenever any of these our members die from this infection, the relatives of this our colleagues do not have anything to fall back on. And we have been clamoring that life insurance be made available to our healthcare workers to no avail. And on top of that, again, we've just had the governor of Kaduna State slashing the doctors and other healthcare workers' salary by 1/4, 25%. All of this happening in the COVID-19 period. This is the height of insensitivity. And we keep wondering if the government can go all this way or go all out to demonstrate their insensitivity, even as COVID-19 is ravaging. It leaves us no choice than to declare an industrial action so that all these ills can be addressed. And to us, there is never a wrong time to seek for justice. And as you know, there's no wrong time to do the right thing. And we believe that this is the time for us to pause and seek for redress so that we can offer better service to Nigerians.
All right, we all want a situation where people who present with ailments, COVID-related or non-COVID-related, are treated. But just clarify to us if any of your members have received the COVID-19 inducement allowance. I mean, that was speculated to have gone round, not just doctors, but other health workers. Have you received that, and what will it take to go back to work?
Again, the widely circulated and speculated COVID allowance and hazard allowance that has been announced severally by most state governments and other federal government agencies is not correct, because as we speak now, not even a dime has been paid to doctors as far as resident doctors practicing in Nigeria is concerned. We have not received a dime. And all of these are part of the things we keep wondering for how long are we going to contend with it? Because if an allowance has been announced to have been paid to doctors and other healthcare workers, it's only natural and fair that such amounts be made available to those people that it is intended for. Unfortunately, we have not received such in this case. The association is ready and is available to make itself, the association has made itself available and will continue to make ourselves available to any stakeholder who feels that they are willing to intervene and restore our service and ensures that the care to Nigerians is not disrupted.
All right, President of the National Association of Resident Doctors, Dr. Aliyu Sokoma, thanks a lot for sharing your thoughts and joining us on the News at 10 tonight. And when the News at 10 returns, Nigeria's GDP expected to contract by 3.2% this year as the World Bank forecasts worst recession for global economy since World War II. That's on Business News. Do join us again. Welcome back to the News at 10. Let's cross over to Abuja now. And here's Ibrahim Adra. Ibrahim.
Hello, German. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for staying with us. The trial of suspected kidnap kingpin Hamisu Bala, popularly known as Wadume, and 6 others accused of terrorism, kidnapping, and illegal possession of firearms has been fixed for June the 22nd. Justice Binta Murtala Nyako of the Federal High Court Abuja fixed the date after the 7 defendants pleaded not guilty to an amended 12-count charge. The prosecutor, Shoaibu Labaran, informed the court that the federal government has decided to amend the charges in order to ensure the commencement of the trial.
Is a trial of a suspected Taraba kidnap kingpin, Hamisu Bala, popularly known as Wadume, and 7 others, as they take their seat before Justice Binta Murtala Nyako. One after the other, the defendants are called to take their plea, and they all plead not guilty to the amended 12-count charge bordering on terrorism, kidnapping, and collection of ransom to the tune of 106 million naira. After pleading not guilty, lawyers to the defendants informed the court of the pending bail application, which is opposed by the prosecutor on the grounds that the application was premised on the former charge involving 20 defendants. In the amended charge, Hamisu Bala and his team are accused of seizing and detaining one Usman Garba at his filling station in Takum and Ibi local government area of Taraba State between February and April 2019 and collected a ransom of 106 million naira before he was released. Hamisu Bala is also accused of escaping from lawful custody, having been lawfully arrested by the police in connection to the kidnap of one Usman Garba in addition to illegal possession of firearms. Justice Nyako, after listening to all the parties in the case, ordered the detention of the suspects at the facility of the Nigeria Police, with an instruction that they be granted access to their lawyers and a few visitors. Although lawyers to the defendants were unavailable for comments, the prosecutor speaks on the amended charges.
This case is one case that fall within the categories of cases that requires to be dealt with expeditiously, and in view of which we needed to sever the charge and to make sure that the case takes off immediately, and we have asked for an accelerated hearing so that we commence this case in earnest and conclude it within record time.
Justice Nyako adjourned the case to June the 22nd for trial.
Now to Kano, where the Federal High Court sitting there today dismissed the application by former Emir of Kano, Muhammad Sanusi II, seeking to stop the investigation of a petition against him involving over 2 billion naira. Presiding Judge Ambrose Louis Alagoa ruled that the court could not restrain the State Public Complaint and Anti-Corruption Commission, PCACC, from carrying out its statutory responsibility. Justice Louis Alagoa noted that the former Emir's fundamental human rights, guaranteed under the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, has not been breached in any way by the investigation of the Commission. Alhaji Sanusi had approached the court on March 6, 2020, seeking to hold PCACC's invitation for him to appear before the Commission and explain his role in an alleged land transaction scam. Meantime, the Federal High Court sitting in Lagos has declined a move seeking the final forfeiture of 2 properties belonging to a former Senate President, Dr. Bukola Saraki. Justice Mohammed Liman cited insufficient and conflicting affidavit evidence filed by the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, EFCC. He held that the suit can only be resolved when the EFCC calls witnesses to provide oral evidence to clear the ambiguities in its written affidavit. The judge, who also dismissed a preliminary objection filed by the former Senate President, assumed jurisdiction to hear the suit and subsequently fixed September 29 for the next hearing. Now to politics, uncertainty appears to surround the planned conduct of the APC governorship primary in Edo State as the Federal High Court in Benin City has asked parties in the suit challenging the method of the election to maintain status quo pending the determination of the matter. The court reached the decision today after hearing the suit, questioning the decision of the APC to adopt the direct primaries to choose its flag bearer. The suit filed by two chieftains of the party in Edo, Mr. Kenneth Asekome and a governorship aspirant Matthew Edo Yirinkweme, as the APC, the National Chairman Adams Oshomole, INEC and the Inspector General of Police as defendants. President Muhammadu Buhari has sent the nomination of the acting President Court of Appeal Justice Monica Dongbang Mensem to the Senate for confirmation as the Appellate Court's President. A statement from the President's Senior Special Assistant on Publicity, Garba Shehu, explained that this is in line with President Buhari's constitutional responsibility. Justice Dongbang Mensem, a serving Justice of the Court of Appeal, was recommended by the National Judicial Council for the nomination by the President. A delegation of Nigerian Governors Forum has met with the Chief of Staff to President to thrash out issues concerning the autonomy of state legislature and the judiciary. The forum is represented by the governors of Ekiti State, Kayode Fayemi, Aminu Tambol of Sokoto and Abubakar Bagudu of Kebbi State. Others at the meeting are the Minister of Justice and that of Finance, Budget and National Planning. The governor said while they supported the autonomy, there is still more work to be done.
We've met with the president before now on it, and the president was very pleased that for us as governors, we are all united in our support for the autonomy of the judiciary and the legislature. That's the position of the 36 governors of the Federation. What is at issue is the constitutionality of the modalities of what had been put in the executive order. And Mr. President was gracious enough to say, okay, given your concerns about that, we will delay the gazetting of the order and allow you and the Attorney General and the Honorable Minister for Finance, Planning and Budget to work out the modalities.
Well, up next on the news at 10 is business news with Melinda Akinlami in our Lagos studio.
Many thanks, Ibrahim. Welcome to Business News. Nigeria's economy is expected to contract by 3.2% this year and 1.7% in 2021 due to the collapse in oil prices and the impact of COVID-19 in the country. The latest forecast released today by the World Bank comes just barely a month after the federal government said it expects the country's economy to shrink between -4.4% and -8.9%, while the International Monetary Fund in April projected a 3.4% contraction this year. The World Bank also expects the global economy to shrink by 5.2% this year due to the massive shock from the coronavirus pandemic and the lockdown measures to contain it. The African Development Bank says it's working with the federal government in the disbursement of the recently approved $288.5 million facility to help cushion the effects of COVID-19 on the economy. On our Business Morning program today, the AFDB Senior Director, Nigeria Country Department, Mr. Ibrahim Afal, explains that the loan is pegged at a 25-year tenor with a low interest rate, which he expects will be disbursed by the end of this month or early July.
We have worked very closely with the government in the areas that they prioritize, and I think testing is one area that the government has prioritized, and I think in line with WHO guidelines. So testing is one area. I think the ability to also support the private sector to be able to manufacture testing kits and other paraphernalia that are needed for this pandemic also would be very important. We also look to see if we can support local manufacturing in those areas. The third area would be to try to see how we can also help vulnerable groups by cushioning some of the impact of this pandemic and the economic fallout from the pandemic in some of these more vulnerable groups.
About 122 billion naira has been gained today at the equities market as investors begin the second week of June with moderate bargain hunting for value stocks across the 5 key sectors of the NSE. Tempo Ashaju has details.
Welcome again to the stock market report. The equity market opens the week positive on renewed confidence in large cap stocks like MTN Nigeria and Boa Cement, propping up the all-share index by 93 basis points after touching a high of 1.6% at intraday. After 2 consecutive trading sessions of profit-taking, activity levels settled lower by 3.6% for the volume of transactions and by 16.8% for the value, all in 4,621 deals. Now, all the key sectors closed in green, but the industrial stocks outperformed the peers, helped mainly by some 3.75% appreciation in Boa Cement. Now, the news of FBN Holdings' sale of its insurance subsidiary continues to fuel gains that ends the stock the most actively traded security for the session, as Wapik Insurance came ahead of 30 other stocks today, appreciating against some losses that we saw in 11 other companies, led in the main by Japal PLC. And that's your stock market report. I'm Tempula Shaju.
Meanwhile, the world's leading stock markets ended Monday's trading session with mixed sentiments as investors maintained focus on economic recovery from the coronavirus pandemic, as well as global protests against racism. Here are some of the closing numbers. That's business news. Back to you, Joma.
Thanks a lot, Melinda. Still ahead on the news at 10, George Floyd murder suspect appears in court as U.S. Democrats introduce bill to reform American police. Plus more stories from our London studio in Around the World in 5. Do stay with us. Welcome back. The controversy surrounding the planned passage of the Infectious Diseases Bill has been thrown into a town hall debate by concerned stakeholders. Yaga Africa and its partners, in collaboration with Channels Television, says it's time to enact legislation that will cater to the needs of Nigerians, especially as it relates to health and control of infectious diseases. The 2-hour show opened up divergent views on the controversial bill. The National Assembly should go ahead with its passage. The convener of the town hall, Samson Itodo, opened discussions, while the sponsor of the bill, Senator Chukwu Kautazi, defends the lawmakers' stance.
Democracy is about participation. When laws are made in the legislature, lawmakers must consult with the people. Citizens' views must be reflected in bills passed by our national and our state houses of assemblies. After all, legislators and elected officials are employees of the people.
And I want the people, the public, to understand one thing. Making a proposition of a bill in the National Assembly does not mean that a law has already been made. It's a proposition. Once you put the proposition, interested parties will come in. And we will tinker with it. We will tinker with this bill. Everybody will be coming with his input.
On the foreign scene now, the police officer accused of murdering George Floyd today appeared virtually in a Minneapolis court where the judge granted the prosecutor's motion to set unconditional bail with some conditions. I beg your pardon. Here's Simon Pusey with more and Around the World in 5.
Good evening and welcome to the Channel Studios here in London for your international news around the world in 5. Minneapolis Council has said they will dismantle the police department in the wake of worldwide protests that have continued over the weekend.
We want change.
Marches demanding racial justice after the death of George Floyd in Minneapolis 2 weeks ago took place again in major cities around the globe. The largest protest in the US was in Los Angeles, where a peaceful crowd of demonstrators filled the Hollywood Boulevard, while clashes with police were reported in Seattle and Portland. A big clean-up has taken place in the UK after statues, including Sir Winston Churchill's in Parliament Square, were sprayed with graffiti. Clashes broke out between protesters and the police after an anti-racism march in London. While in Bristol, demonstrators tore down a statue of Edward Colston, a 17th century slave trader, and pushed it into the harbour. Mostly peaceful protests took place in front of US embassies of several other countries around the world. The death toll of COVID-19 in the United States has surpassed 110,000 victims. That's according to the Johns Hopkins University. The number of confirmed COVID-19 cases in the US is now over 1,900,000. Officials are deeply concerned a second wave of COVID-19 could hit the country, and the protests over the death of George Floyd might be encouraging a second spread. On the other end of the scale, New Zealand's Prime Minister has announced the country has eliminated transmission of the coronavirus. Jacinda Ardern also said they will lift all containment measures except for border curbs, adding she did a little dance upon hearing that the country had no active cases.
I did a little dance. Definitely not. I showed Neve. She was caught a little by surprise, but...
Kenya's Chief Justice has asked the country's president to respect the rule of law and swear in 41 judges proposed to him without further delay. Chief Justice David Maraga said Uhuru Kenyatta hadn't met with or spoken to him about what he called a near paralysis of court operations due to the president's refusal to swear in judges. The judges were nominated last year, but President Kenyatta wrote to the commission saying some of them had integrity issues. 2 courts have since declared the president's decision as unconstitutional. The German Defence Minister Annegret Kramp-Karrenbauer says Berlin has not yet received confirmation from Washington about reports that the US plans to withdraw thousands of troops from the country. According to a senior US official, President Donald Trump has ordered the military to remove 9,500 troops from Germany. The US Army has been a consistent presence in the country since the Cold War, and this reduction would be an unprecedented move. The former head of the International Association of Athletics Federations has arrived in court in Paris to stand trial on charges of corruption, money laundering and a breach of trust linked to a Russian doping scandal. Prosecutors allege Lamine Diack solicited more than €3 million from athletes suspected of doping to cover up the allegations and allow them to continue competing. This would include the 2012 London Olympic Games. Investigators described a web of corruption in world athletics under Diack's leadership. He has previously denied any wrongdoing. Hundreds of Venezuelans have queued in mile-long lines to try to fill their car tanks with subsidised gasoline over the weekend after years of acute fuel shortages. The new system, put in place by President Nicolas Maduro, has effectively ended decades of unlimited heavy subsidies in Venezuela, where cheap fuel has long been considered the norm. The country has one of the largest crude oil reserves on the planet, but its economy has deteriorated due to a plunge in prices for crude, which is its main export. Schools are reopening in South Africa after the government eased lockdown measures there. The Education Minister, Angie Motshega, said 95% of the learning institutions have met requirements for safe reopening. The reopening of schools was postponed by 1 week to allow for full compliance. The minister also said no school that is not compliant will be allowed to reopen, but that no learner shall be left behind. And finally, Spanish football's top-flight La Liga will use virtual images of stands in television broadcasts with added fan audio produced by the makers of the FIFA video game. The championship is due to return to action on Thursday. Domestic broadcasters in Spain will offer viewers the option to watch with natural sound for the broadcast of games played behind closed doors with no fans. However, the international audience will receive only the enhanced broadcasts with added audio and graphics. And that's your international news around the world in 5. Now back to the Channel studios in Lagos.
Welcome to Sports News. Former Super Eagles forward Emmanuel Amunike says he feels privileged to have been part of the 1994 squad regarded by many as the best Nigeria ever had. Amunike, who had a chat with Channel Television and Instagram Live, believes the team's unity was the reason behind the success achieved by the Clemens Westerhoff-led side. French Ligue 1 side Lyon returned to training today for the first time since the middle of March due to the coronavirus crisis, as Rudy Garcia's side gets set to get back on the training pitch a full week before any of their top-flight rivals. Players and coaches present at the training center wore protective masks as they look forward to the second leg of the UEFA Champions League tie against Juventus. Finally, England and Manchester City forward Raheem Sterling has backed protests taking place across the UK, saying racism shall be fought against like a disease. Sterling insists the world must find a solution for racism just the same way a vaccine is sought for the COVID-19 pandemic. That's Sports News. Ijoma, back to you.
Thanks a lot, Olumide. And the main news again. Fresh revelations on Kano mysterious deaths emerged today as the Presidential Task Force on COVID-19 revealed that about 60% of deaths in Kano may have been triggered by coronavirus. And that's the news at 10 tonight. Thank you so much for staying with us. I'm Ijoma Onyato. Do have a good night and stay safe.